Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Thank you, Procopius. And you ended there talking about how important it was to communicate to consumers. And I have a particular interest in communicating to consumers, and that's why I'm here today. First of all, welcome to London. And I hope you're enjoying this unseasonal weather. It's not raining, so take advantage of it. And thank you for bringing all these extraordinary oils, some of which I've had the privilege to taste this afternoon. Thank you for bringing them all to London and for all your hard work in producing and creating them. And you know, it often occurs to me as I see bottles of olive oil, how that each of them tells a story. They tell lots of stories. They tell stories that date back to biblical times, to pre-biblical times, to Minoan times. There's arguments about whether it's 5,000 years or 6,000 years, but they tell a story that is really historic. They also tell your story as producers. They tell stories perhaps about your grandparents, perhaps about your great-grandparents, perhaps about just an olive grove that you have recently started and started production on. So those bottles are full of stories, and they're humanity stories and they're your stories. And I believe passionately that these stories need to be told, and people need to understand the implications of them. So my story began, I'm an MD, I'm a doctor, I'm a family physician in Cambridge, and I became interested in lifestyle medicine, and I was a founding member of the European Society of Lifestyle Medicine and the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, believing passionately, as we know, that 70 to 80% of chronic diseases can be prevented by diet and lifestyle. So I became increasingly interested. I also have some public health roles, some roles with the British Medical Association. So I have the privilege of meeting politicians and policymakers. And it occurred to me how important it was to persuade people that diet and lifestyle, in particular the Mediterranean diet, was actually the dietary paradigm that we should be adopting to prevent the disastrous health consequences that we all know are coming our way if we don't make these kind of improvements. So I started talking to patients in my consulting room, and then they said, look, we want to hear more about this. We want more than 10 minutes. So will you come out into the community and talk to a group of us? So I started off talking to women's institutes in the UK, in England. You probably don't have women's institutes in anywhere else in the world. I think you have some in America, but they're very special. They're special things, but I couldn't explain what it was. It would be a bit like trying to explain what cricket was. Women's institutes are difficult to understand. But I started to talk to clubs and societies, and then got invited to talk to larger conferences of medics. One of my particular areas of interest is in educating other doctors about the importance of nutrition and the Mediterranean diet. So I've been speaking to doctors, medics, and others, and have subsequently been invited onto the advisory board of the Mediterranean Diet Foundation and the Olive Wellness Institute, which is a new institute that has been set up in Australia to spread the word about the health of olive oil. So one of my great passions is communicating, and I have written a book called The Olive Oil Diet, which tries to encapsulate the health of the Mediterranean diet with olive oil at its foundations for everyday consumers to understand the health benefits of olive oil. So when I talk to consumers, I start talking to them about the Mediterranean diet, and I talk about the reduced risk associated with Alzheimer's, cancers, cardiovascular disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, improved longevity, improved quality of life on the Mediterranean diet, and even it affects our DNA. And if we are adherent to the Mediterranean diet, we have slightly longer caps on our DNA, slightly longer telomeres. So the science of the Mediterranean diet is absolutely compelling, and we have to tell this story. We can tell the story about the Mediterranean diet, and we can say the Mediterranean diet is the answer to our dietary questions. Let's stop talking about carbohydrates. Let's stop talking about fats. Let's stop talking about whether it's high carb, high fat, low fat. It's the Mediterranean diet. That is the dietary pattern that we know works. And we're increasingly understanding why it works scientifically. And then I'm also very keen to talk to people about extra virgin olive oil, which I believe is absolutely at the heart of the Mediterranean diet. I think it's really difficult to take olive oil out of the Mediterranean diet. And we know that olive oil in itself is associated with, for example, a reduced risk of stroke by as much as 78% from the highest consumers to the lowest consumers of olive oil, a study done in Bordeaux. We know the Predimed study in 2012, 2013 showed that a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil, for which they measured the compliance to the diet by measuring urinary hydroxytyrosol. So we know that people were consuming that diet because one of the products of extra virgin olive oil was in their urine. And we know that it showed a reduced risk of mortality and stroke and even cardiovascular disease and cancers. So we're seeing some individual evidence about the importance. So what we need to do is to get out to explain to consumers about the importance of extra virgin olive oil as a foundation for the Mediterranean diet and the health benefits it can bring. We need people to understand about taste. We need people to understand about all the aspects that confer the health of extra virgin olive oil. And I believe that my job will be done when I can walk outside of this hotel and I can just go up to a stranger in the street and I can say, "What's a polyphenol?" And they'll say, I know what a polyphenol is. Yes, it's this very special compound that you see in extra virgin olive oil. And then my second question will be, okay, so what is your favorite olive oil? What have you got on the table at the moment? What have you got on the kitchen? What have you got on the table? Tell me about its taste. Tell me about how that relates to its polyphenols. And they'll say, yes, I have this fantastic oil I'm tasting at the moment. It's got a little bit of bitterness, it's got some fruitiness, it's got a little bit of pepperiness, and it's all that fabulous polyphenol, that oleocanthal, I think it's called oleocanthal, yes, I think I get that right. That's at the back of my throat. And then I think my job might at least be done.
Well, thank you.